Hey, the kids are in bed. It's week one, and nothing better than the WPIAL Blitz show. Ian McMeans, Bruce Badgley, and Ryan Lehmeier is becoming traditional here with the Ryan. Thanks for joining us here to start things off.
Hey, I appreciate you guys having me. Looking forward to another year, obviously, getting started here, and seeing you two and your show getting started again. Just excited to be a part of it again, for another year. And thanks so much for having me.
Great.
Coach, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate the time you're taking. So, you guys had a great year last year, back-to-back WPIAL champions. Now have been to the state championship game two years in a row. Battled LaSalle all the way to the end last year. And so, talk a little about like what's the off season been like for you guys? Now coming into this season, you've got a lot of returning starters on offense. Last year, you had to work in some new starters, but this year you've got a really solid core kind of coming back, especially at the skill positions. So, how's the off season gone for your team?
The offseason's been great. I think the kids have been really working to the standard that they've set. This is the fourth year, and these seniors are the guys that started when we got there, and so I think there's just a lot of continuity that way. So, just be able to hit the ground running from last year to this year, and it kind of segments there. Right in January, moving into February. I thought it was important that our guys got away from it for a little bit. So January, they took some time off, which I thought was needed considering how late we went. We've had some things going on campus with some things with practice fields and whatnot. So it was just a long year. So I thought it was good to get them out in January. And we came back early February, and they've worked unbelievably hard. I mean, these kids got a tireless work ethic, and they're competitive, and they love each other, and I think they genuinely enjoy being there. So it's a fun group to work with, and again, this is kind of the most investment on either end. This is kind of the guys we've been there with for 4 years, so it's been fun to get started with them.
Ryan, we see one another. We talk about it, at Cumberland Valley, big games, championship games, East West, and what have you. The one thing that I've noticed over the years, and this is just, between you and I, is I see a sense of calm when you're out on that field. Okay. When I see you in these big games, and that's got to permeate down, to your team too. They're looking at you and they see that, hey, this moment isn't too big for us. We belong here. And that's the message that comes across from you. Is that the message, obviously, you're trying to send to this team?
Well, whether it's directly or indirectly, I think it's important. That I think like anything, if you want to be able to compete and win those games, you got to do everything the right way all the time. And I think in the biggest games, that's when it matters. And I think showing our guys, you can't just talk about poise and composure, and then in the big moments not have it. So. I think, trying to be, good role model for those guys in those big moments. But I think, we talked about it this week. Those are the games that we expect to play in, and we want to play in games like that. And the games that we've been able to schedule and go out and openly get games early in the year, that first one, those were all scheduled on purpose because, we want to play games like that. So, we have another great opportunity at a similar, opportunity this Friday with a great program. 22, state championships out of the state of New Jersey, and just really, really buttoned up from top to bottom. So we got a great challenge again, this Friday. But these are the games that we want to coach in, and our kids want to play in, and we couldn't be more excited about it.
That
Go
actually
ahead,
took
Ian.
part of my next question. I was going to ask about the Virgin Catholic game. That last year when you were on the show, you talked about Central Catholic being a Lasallian institution and the importance of playing another Lasallian school and obviously LaSalle College High School. So how did the game with Virgin kind of come about? Did you guys, and you've been talking about it for a while, was it something that materialized over the off season? You are obviously talked a bit about their program tradition and history. So how'd this game come to be?
I mean, I really, coaching circles, and I think, there's got a ton of respect for a lot of those guys and clinics that we get to see each other in the off season and stuff like that. And Ty Brown, the athletic director of Woodland Hills, him and I've become, I would say great friends, but we talk to each other a good bit every year. I think he does an awesome job with this kickoff classic. So our communication has really just built over the last 3 years, and he had a tie there, and I kind of had known a lot about them, from some of my time in college coaching and being out that way and knowing a little bit about that Jersey Catholic League. So it was just I thought it was a really attractive thing when it kind of came out, and we were able to kind of talk it through and use the Wolverina again, and they've been great to us, and really looking forward to it. So more so just kind of organically came about in the off season, but we're looking for these type of games for sure.
Nice.
Ryan, what's obviously you've been at the helm now for a few years. What's the biggest takeaway that you have from the time that you took this job until going into this season?
Wow, that's a great question. I think when you get the job, there's a ton of things that you think you're going to do. And then, they're just really not near the priority list when you get your hands dirty, and I think that first year, everything happened so fast. We got hired late. By the time we got the staff in, and we kind of inherited this really senior laden team that didn't really know us. So it was more, football scheme, get the team ready, let's play. Where what we really lacked was the connectivity. I don't know if the trust was there between the players and the coaches, and I don't know if that's anybody's fault. I think time, you need time. But I just think that that everyone wants to talk about speed and strength and everything, all the the things that come about with players, but it's really the connectivity amongst them, that I think we've been able to build going into this fourth year. And I think that even to this day, I mean, we have some really talented guys now. That first year, I mean, we were talented as you could be, but I don't know how much of a team we were. So I think, just if that's been reinforced, that it's still about the team, and it's still about the stuff that isn't corny and the stuff that takes a lot of time in the in the weight room, and trust amongst, building trust amongst kids. And that's not easy to do nowadays. So I think that's why it's so hard to do.
Right.
Building off that, we always like to give shout outs to offensive linemen on this show, and you have probably one of the most heralded offensive lines in the entire state this year, with three guys committed to high D1 schools and all five guys having D1 offers at this point. But last year, I remember you were on the show. We asked you the question about the lineman, and you talked about Angelo Pugliano and everything that he did for your team. And for my money's worth, he might have been the 6A player of the year last year, because he was absolutely unstoppable in everything he did. So going into this year, you talked about having that team. Who are some of those kind of under the radar glue guys that might not be at the top of everyone's radar, but are really important to kind of making the team work?
Yeah. Manny Rigas jumps off the page. Manny Rigas was on that defense last year, has played for us since a sophomore. But a name you don't hear a lot, but tell you what, he's tough, he's reliable. His teammates love him. I think that, he plays the game the right way. So Manny Rigas, I think's there. Nick Karinga, our nickel, I think he's played. He was lights out as a junior and really did some big things in some big games. And I think his name probably flies under the radar a little bit. And the guy that, I'm really excited to see, the second year is Jalen Smith. And we had some hard conversations in January, just where we thought he could take his game. And he answered the bell in every facet and just got himself in, unbelievable shape. And I'm really excited to see what he does.
Wow, that's great stuff, Ryan. I tell you what, listen, thanks so much for taking some time. We really appreciate it. We know how busy you are and that, but I tell you, we can't break with tradition.
No, I appreciate you guys giving on. This is a different year. I mean, I'm actually back in work. We're already back to school already. Where in years past, you kind of always got me at the end of the summer, so I was still a night out. But appreciate you guys having me
Yeah.
on. And again, you guys do great work. Looking forward to watching your show the rest of the year.
Thanks.
Thanks a
One more
lot,
quick
Ryan.
question before
Oh,
you
what quick?
go. Can I get one
Okay.
more in? So one of the big, I don't know if it was a big storyline, around the WPIAL, but definitely for your team, that the Pittsburgh Steelers built a facility down in the Hazelwood Green development. So you guys actually have your own home stadium now and don't have to bounce around to different high schools. So how excited are you guys to actually have a stadium to be your home to play all your home games in?
Oh, it's been fantastic. And we started down there at the beginning of August. And just the playing surface, the locker room facilities, the staff that's put in place, it's awesome. I mean, I can't say enough. We had an alumni event down there the other night. We had a lot of past football alums come down and see our field and had to get together afterwards. And just to be able to see those guys who have been watching Central football for 40 years and, have never had a home field to finally have a home field. And,
Wow.
you can see that our Central Catholic community kind of finally have a home. It's really cool. And, hats off to the Steelers and US Steel Field. And, our guy Charlie Kiss down there that's been taking care of us. And, it's been an awesome experience. And we can't wait to, kick it off down there in a couple weeks.
Awesome, my
Nice.
man. I tell you, great question, Ian. Hey, listen, thanks, Ryan, and best of luck, man. We'll be watching.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, we'll see you
Yep.
later.
Take care. Good luck this year.
Yep.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Thanks.
That's just a microcosm of the relationship that we've been able to build with Ryan. I was
Mhm.
thinking about that all week, as we were getting ready for the show and what have you, is that the first time he was on the show, it was, God, he wasn't even the head coach at
No,
Central
he,
Catholic. He was the offensive coordinator at where?
Seneca Valley.
Seneca Valley. I
Yeah.
mean, and then he lands the job, and it's been so great seeing him. I was truthful with him when I told him that, the times that I see him now on the field of Cumberland Valley, really exudes confidence, and really carries himself so well. And it's just fantastic to see. And one of these times we're going to get your butt out here for the state championships, my friend. I know that you've got a lot of mouths there to deal with, but that's a bucket list item here pretty soon.
Yeah, at some point I'd like to make it out. We've got another baby on the way this fall, so it won't be this year, but you know, um, so for those keeping track at home, that'll be 8 for us. So that's yeah.
You and
And
Sean Alexander, man. I mean, you guys are in a race.
yeah. Um, so on just another note before we kind of kick things off with our preview here, as you know, Bruce, I often wear shirts for a purpose on this show.
Yeah,
So while
that's
I'm a North Catholic alumni
uh-huh.
and Central is our rival, so I could not bring myself to wear an actual Central Catholic shirt. But I wore a Roman Empire shirt because
I was
Roman
gonna say that's
Thompson,
the Roman Empire.
it is the Roman Empire. Yes, Roman Thompson is Central's star running back slash middle linebacker. So I wore this as a little shout out to one of Central's key contributors on both sides of the ball. He was also one of the top wrestlers in the state, but just had to throw that in there. If the Central folks are still listening, I did wear a Roman Empire shirt for you guys.
I thought it was some kind of ink blot thing, but then as I looked at
Yeah.
it, it was pretty. I picked out the boot of Italy. I'm going like, what has he got?
Yeah, and it's got the SPQR on it too that you just can't see under the camera. But yeah, I wanted to throw that little tidbit in there before we get things rolling here. So first and foremost, thanks to everyone who has tuned in again for another year of this show. I think this is the 7th year that we've done this because we started in 2020. So kind of hard
Yeah.
to believe that we're 7 years into the WPIAL Blitz show now. And it started just kind of as a labor of love for us that we during COVID, we're like, let's just talk football and try and get some information out there because people couldn't go to games. And we were trying to talk through all the crazy playoff scenarios and everything else. And it's kind of blossomed into this show where now we have really good relationships with numerous head coaches that we can
Well,
just shoot an
yeah,
email
Bob
to and they'll join
Palco
our show.
like was here, and then he was to Penn State, and now he's back even. So,
Bob Palco is back.
I
Yeah, that
mean,
is
we,
that is one of the big stories that we will talk about when we get to 5A at Bob Palco's return. So thanks everyone for tuning in to the WPIAL Blitz show. You've obviously found us on YouTube. You can check us out on the artist formerly known as Twitter. I guess it's X now, but I'll still call it Twitter because I'm a Yinzer from Pittsburgh and I will always call things by their old names. We also have a Facebook and rarely used Instagram account, but the main place to find us is obviously Twitter, YouTube, and then my articles on steelcityblitz.com. I've got conference previews up right now for all of the conferences from 6A down to 2A. The 1A ones will be posting within the next few days. So we'll have conference previews out there for every conference, as well as some other interesting factoids that will post before the season kicks off on Friday. And we're very happy to announce this year that we have a sponsor of the show, which is Get Recruited Consulting. Bruce, I'll let you talk about them for a minute now, and I know we'll talk a little bit more about them later.
yeah, Get Recruited Consulting does a great job in cutting through all of the red tape and facade there is to get in contact with college coaches, on a name by name basis. Andrew Cohen, 25 years, college coach throughout Division One, Division Two. Did a lot of work, say in like the Patriot League and what have you, but has a lot of contacts out there between Andrew and the 5 other guys that work with him. And the key thing with Andrew is that it's all on a personal level. If a recruit or his family have a question, all they have to do is pick up that phone number, and we're going to have that, a little bit later in the broadcast. But, if you've ever got any questions, Andrew's there to call. If you want your film evaluated, Andrew's there to call. And highly recommend every single player who is interested in college football send a film over to Andrew. He'd be glad to do a free eval. 100% of his clients have received money to play football in college. Now, he doesn't take everybody, but they tell you what, he does a fantastic job, and I'm proud to be associated with him. Andrew and I's association goes way back. I've seen a lot of football camps. The best football camp I saw ever run was one that Andrew ran, and that's why I reached out to him to get associated with it, because with Get Recruited, because it is the best service out there. So that's why we're involved.
Yeah. All right, great. So let's jump right in. Let's talk 6A, where Central Catholic is the two-time defending champions. They've faced North Allegheny in the championship game for the last 4 years. And Central obviously went all the way to the state finals for the second year in a row, came up just short against LaSalle College. But really, they were in that game all the way until the very end, when LaSalle added a couple late touchdowns. But, that was mid fourth quarter. That was a one
Yeah, that
score game.
interception by Joey O'Brien was just the backbreaker there, I mean.
Yeah. Yeah. But Central does bring back a ton of talent this year. Like I mentioned, not only at quarterback with Owen Herrick returning, but a lot of other offensive skill position players, which, if you think back to this show last year when we did it with our season preview and had Bob Long on previewing that Central LaSalle game, that one of the things that I kind of talked about was that Central early in the year was going to kind of have to ride their defense, their line play, their running game until Owen Herrick could get comfortable at quarterback and they could kind of work in, all of their new offensive starters. Now this year, Herrick's coming back after throwing for almost 2,500 yards last year. Roman Thompson is back at running back after scoring nearly 30 touchdowns last year. He's committed to Maryland to play linebacker. Chris Black Jr. At running back really burst onto the scene in the postseason. And, when we had Patrick from the PA Football History on for our championship preview show after he had watched a bunch of the state semifinal games happen, he talked about Chris Black being, one of the best guys on the field that he saw that whole weekend up there at Altoona. So that's a name to definitely keep an eye on. Chris Black had an injury early in last season, didn't play as much, but really took over down the stretch in the postseason. Jaden Alexander also back at running back for Central. And then I mentioned the three guys on the line: Jimmy Callis, Ohio State commit, James Halter, Notre Dame commit, and John Sasek, Penn State commit. So, I mean, you've got three guys going to major Power 5 programs on an offensive line, and the two other guys also have D1 offers. So if that isn't the most highly recruited offensive line in the state, I'm not sure who is. But Central has all the pieces now in place, I think, to make another run. They are clearly the best team in the WPIAL this year. And I think they've got all the pieces to make another run to the state championship game and face whoever comes out of the East. And I figure I'll just run through some of the other WPIAL notes here. And then if we want to talk statewide as well, I do think moving through that North Allegheny is the other top contender here. Once again, probably for the fifth straight year, for all intents and purposes, it will most likely be the two of them facing off in the WPIAL title game. But North Allegheny, they lost their leading rusher, but their quarterback comes back along with their leading receiver. So they do have some pieces returning there. Brady Brinkley, the quarterback, Ben Kern, wide receiver. But the team I think to watch is Cannon McMillan. And this is one of the really potential feel-good stories of the year, that last year their coach Mike Evans was on leave because he was undergoing some treatments for cancer, but he was able to battle through that. He's back on the sidelines this year. They've got an 1,800-yard passer and Ty Jansma returning, along with two running backs and Roman Cimarelli at wide receiver, who had over almost 400 yards receiving last year. So Cannon Max made the playoffs the last few seasons, 6 times in 8 years. But with the skill position players and then Coach Evans returning to the sidelines, I think they're really set up to not only make the playoffs once again, but especially if they can get that 3 seed and face North Allegheny instead of having to face Central in the first round. I mean, you never know what can happen. I'm not going to say that they could knock off North Allegheny, but I think they're potentially one of the really good feel-good stories of the year with Coach Evans coming back.
I totally agree. I think that, somebody's going to have to emerge to kind of, clip at North Allegheny's heels here, and considering now that there's really, amongst those 5 teams there, somebody I think is going to emerge this year. I think that we're going to see it kind of merge to more like a top 3 and a bottom 4. And I'd say the most likely candidate is obviously Cannon McMillan. So good stuff there, Ian.
Yeah, I think the Norwin almost did it last year, right? They came really close. They, couldn't quite get over that hump. Norwin does have some guys coming back. Their leading rusher, Gio Rothruff, is back this year after running for almost 1,300 yards last season. So I think Norwin will be in the mix for that 4th playoff spot. Seneca Valley just barely missed last year. They do have to replace some guys. Junior wide receiver Rory O'Shea is the top returning skill position player there. But Cannon Mac is definitely the 3rd best team in 6A right now. I think Norwin and Seneca Valley are probably the next 2. And then at the bottom, Mount Lebanon and Hempfield. Hempfield lost a lot of their skill position players. starting quarterback, top 2 rushers, top 3 receivers for Hempfield are all gone. Mount Lebanon lost their dual threat quarterback, Patrick Smith, from last year. They do return a couple receivers. But the thing to watch for Mount Lebanon, and I'll just throw this out there, is Mount Lebanon's kids that are in like 8th and 9th grade right now have been like crushing the middle school football circuit for like a few years now, like dating back to when they were in 6th grade. So Mount Lebanon might not be real good this year with a new head coach, but they've got a really talented pool of kids coming up in the next 3 or 4 years that, some of them are in 9th grade this year, some of them are in 8th grade, but that kind of group, that 8th, 9th grade group is really strong in the community. So if they're able to, keep them all here and bring them up through the team and get them experience over the next few years, I think Mount Lebanon has something brewing that's coming. It might not be there yet, but it's coming.
Yeah, good stuff.
Okay. So do you want to talk a little bit about statewide in 6A? Because I know the Penn Live rankings for the year don't drop until tomorrow. Usually we also have the preseason Penn Live rankings here, but they're not coming
Yeah.
out until tomorrow. So couldn't put those up. But, I do think that statewide, we do have some interesting storylines that now some teams that were top 5A contenders, the Bishop McDevitt out of Harrisburg and then Roman Catholic, who met in the last 2 5A state title games, are both moving up to 6A with the success formula. So now you've got those top tier 5A teams are now also in 6A, along with the LaSalle's, the St. Joe's Preps, and all that of the world. So, how do you see things shaping up out east?
Yeah, everybody is kind of anointed Roman, and I'm kind of like, Lee Corso here, not so fast. I mean, I think that the demise of a LaSalle is like way overblown here. I think that they're going to put a really gosh darn good team, out on the field. And the interesting part, and we should kind of what I'm going to watch amongst those teams this year is out in District 12 anyway, is Malvern Prep from the Interact plays LaSalle, Imhotep, and St. Joe Prep this year. And so there's kind of at least a connect the dots before we get to the end of the season on, how powerful these teams really may or may not be. So it really is. I think that, the power structure is all in 6A going to come out of the Philadelphia area. But as you said, you can't discount the fact that Bishop McDevitt now is in 6A. And let's not forget the Little Lions up in State College. I think, like, from as far as for me, and obviously in the West, I think State College might be, the biggest challenge, to Pittsburgh Central Catholic before Cumberland Valley. So keep an eye on those Little Lions up in District 6, UPCC fans, for your, maybe your next likeliest challenger.
Yeah, and I know that State College has always had a pretty good rivalry with Harrisburg as well, and now Harrisburg has their local rivals in Bishop McDevitt up in 6A too. So that's going to be interesting to see how that all kind of plays out there. And is that the Mid-Penn Conference in the middle of the state?
It is.
Yeah. See, look, I remember some of these things after
the world doesn't end. You mean the world doesn't end there at like Allegheny, edge of Allegheny County?
No, it goes to about the middle of Westmoreland County, actually.
Okay, well, that's okay.
Around Ligonier Valley is about where it's. I'm kidding. So, all right, moving on to 5A, where this to me is one of the most intriguing classifications in the entire WPIAL. I think probably the most intriguing classification, just because the amount of talent, not only on the teams, but on the sidelines with the coaches that you have here in 5A now. Peters Township's the defending champions. They faced Pine Richland in the last 3 championship games, and they took that McDevitt team to overtime in the state semifinals. So that was a really good Peters Township team last year. However, they graduated a lot of kids from that team, And looking at their conference now in the Allegheny Six, Baldwin, who was, the bottom feeder of the conference, went winless the last couple of years, moved to play independent. And now you've got, I think it's 30 WPIAL championships between the 6 teams that are there. And you've got the 2 winningest head coaches in WPIAL championship history, with Bill Turpak at Thomas Jefferson, who has 10, and Bob Palko returning to West Allegheny with 9, plus Peters Township having won 2 out of the last 3 titles, and Upper St. Clair, who returns a really loaded team, and Bethel Park, who's got some D1 recruits. And let's not forget, Trinity won that conference with TJ last year in 4A. So, you've got some shuffling around of teams here. But I think that Allegheny Six conference is just so loaded that it's going to be like playing an SEC schedule there, where just every week is just another powerhouse team and powerhouse coaching staff that you have to get through.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that that's kind of the MO, not only for the WPIAL, but I think across the state. I think that a lot of 5A, it is just a slugfest to grind it out, battle, each and every week. I think that 5A, from top to from all of the top teams, there's not that big a difference between that and the guys that are the middle of the road. I think on any given night there could be upsets. I think in 5A, I think it's going to be the classification where there's going to be a lot of what I call say what games. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Say what? That somebody beat somebody else that you weren't considering that, that it was an upset. So not only I think that's going to be absolutely the case in the WPIAL this year. I think that is just going to be, topsy-turvy, from one week to the next on who's going to look great and who's going to look, middle of the road.
Yeah, and just kind of running through the conferences here too, not only with how loaded the Allegheny Six is, and everyone's always talking about Pine Richland, and for good reason. They're, bring back a lot of talent. They're a loaded team. Probably are the odds-on favorites to be not only in the championship game for the 5th straight season, but also, when you look at that Northeast Conference, Moon moved over from the Allegheny Six, and Moon gave Pine Richland everything they could handle in the semifinals last year. And you have Coach Casper now coming back to his alma mater at North Hills after his stints at Pine Richland and Mars, which that's another one where they might make some noise this year, but a couple years down the line, I think North Hills is going to be right there with Pine Richland, because Coach Casper is one of the best coaches in the WPIAL, hands down.
Yeah, clearly, he's got some. There's a reason why he's there, and that is to rebuild the program. And it does sound like, when I was looking at that, it sounds like he's got a little work left there. But I'm sure before now and the end of the season, when we talk to him here on the show, that we'll get the lowdown, the straight scoop, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. So I think, looking at kind of who the contenders are heading into the year, I mentioned Pine Richland being probably the top contender just because of everyone they bring back, starting with their dual threat quarterback, Aaron Obi Strader. One of the he's been one of the top quarterbacks in the WPIAL for a few years now, coming off a season where he threw for over 2,200 yards and 34 touchdowns and had over 750 rushing yards and 12 touchdowns. So, I mean, he's just an all-around force. Khalil Taylor at wide receivers, now committed to Nebraska. He scored 25 total touchdowns last year. And they've got always good offensive line play there at Pine Richland, and just are going to be a force to be reckoned with. I like Moon's chances to make the playoffs as well out of that Northeast Conference. I think they bring back some pretty good players with Deontay Henry at running back and a couple others. North Hills, I think, Coach Kasparovich has done some really good things in his career, and I think they've got enough returning talent. They can battle for a playoff spot. Penn Hills kind of just missed the playoffs last year when they lost that Week 9 game to Plum. But they've got a new head coach, Dan Mason, who's also a alumni of the program, that's going to try and get them back on track. Armstrong made the playoffs last year as the final wild card out of the Big East Conference last year. They now move over to the Northeast Conference, so they've got a lot of returning talent there. And then Plum made the playoffs last year too, on that last second win over Penn Hills. So there's all of those teams in that Northeast Conference, with the exception of Penn Hills, were in the playoffs last year. And the only reason Penn Hills wasn't was because they lost to Plum in the final week of the season. So, another, stacked conferences all around, right? Moving back over to the Allegheny Six, not only is Peters Township the defending champs, have won 2 out of the last 3, but Upper St. Clair is really loaded this season. They bring back their top 2 running backs in John Banbury and Luca Curry, do-it-all player and Josh Snyder, Ryan Robbins at offensive tackle is a Penn State commit. And I think Upper St. Clair has kind of just been waiting to break through. They've lost to Peters Township the last couple of years in the playoffs. And this might be the year that they're finally able to get over that Peters Township hump after all those guys graduated from Peters, and Upper St. Clair brings so much back. Thomas Jefferson moving up from 4A. This one is really interesting to me because Bill Chirpak is, the winningest coach in WPIAL history with 10 championships. Peters obviously has Thomas Jefferson always has the long string of success in 4A and AAA dating back to the 4 classification era. They bring back their leading rusher, Tyler Eber, and their leading receiver, Kane Egerton. But the thing with Thomas Jefferson is, even when they were in 4A, their non-conference games, they never really played a lot of teams up, right? They'd always play other 4A teams. Sometimes they play a Bell Vernon, who is in 3A some years, right? They haven't played a lot of teams from the higher classification. And Thomas Jefferson has the talent to compete, but I wonder now, and they're, in the South Hills of Pittsburgh, right? They're right next door to Upper St. Clair and Bethel Park. And, Peters is just a little bit down the road.
The real big boys.
Yeah, they're right there geographically, right? They're literally neighboring school districts. And now that they're actually going to play some of these other teams that they're bordering, I'm really interested to see how it plays out, right? Because even back when it was, 10 years ago when we were in AAA, TJ didn't really play many quad A teams that were, some of those neighboring schools. So I think I have them on my championship contenders list. I think they're good enough and talented enough to compete in 5A for a title. Then this is not a knock on them, but just looking at historically over time who TJ has played in the regular season, they haven't played a lot of these other teams that are in 5A now. So I'm really interested to see how it plays out, when they go through this gauntlet of a schedule.
All I have to say is I don't think history is on their side. What team have we seen? And I'm not even talking about WPIAL. What team have we seen that has been moved up in the success formula or moved up in classification because they got bigger or whatever like that, that say won a state title or was a powerhouse in their classification and did well in that classification? It's been few and far between. I mean, you just saw another example in District 12 where Imhotep Charter was an also ran in 6A. Okay, they won a title in 5A. They get moved up. They're an also ran for 2 years. Now they're back in 5A. Okay, but what team have we seen that has moved up from say 3A to 4A or 4A to 5A that has had any level of success in the higher classification? I can't think of one.
Aliquippa.
Well, okay, all right, okay, all right. Well,
that was the easy one. That was the slam dunk answer.
Right. Fair point. But there's a team that dropped back. I mean, dropped down because of the success formula, because they didn't technically have the success.
Actually, they did. Going back, right? Aliquippa was in 2016, 10 years ago, when the 6 classification era started. Aliquippa was a 1A size school that opted to play up in 3A. And then the PIAA brought in the success formula a few years after that, because they didn't have it the first 2 years, right? They brought it in after the 2019 season. and forced Aliquippa up from 3A to 4A. So they were essentially a 1A size school playing in 4A. And they've grown a little bit. They're a 2A size school now. And the PIAA tried to force them up into 5A after they went to multiple state championship games in a row, won a couple state titles in that run. They went to 3 in a row and they won 2 out of 3.
Right, but
But
technically,
they were able to move down this year because of a court order. They took the state to court,
and that's what I'm pointing out.
3A.
It wasn't that if it was the PIAA brother, they would have been up in 5A, or they would have been in a higher classification. And obviously, you don't know what would have happened had they played at that higher class. But all of these schools, it seems like that move up, just have a really difficult time. And whether it's mentally, I'll be honest with you, when I talk to some of these coaches, okay, and there isn't a coach that that I've talked to that moves up in classification that doesn't cry the blues. I mean, whether they're supposed to be in there because of enrollment or not, they are. Well, I can't understand why they put us in the classification. I mean, why are we playing up against those big schools? And
yeah, well, and another example that I'll give is Avonworth. That at the start of the 6 class era, they were in 2A. They were single A. They were a single A program in 2015 in the 4 class division, but they were 2A when the 6 classes started. They won the 2A WPIAL championship, and like most 2A WPIAL champions, wound up losing to Southern Columbia in the 2019 state finals. And then they were just a growing district, so their enrollment bumped them up to 3A, and they've now been to 4 straight WPIAL championship games in 3A, 2-time defending WPIAL champs, defending state champions. So, I think Avonworth is another one that I could point to that moved up. But to your point about teams moving up, like let's take South Fayette, right? South Fayette started in 4A at the beginning of the 6 class era, won a 4A WPIAL championship in 2018. They did not lose a single conference game in 4 years playing in 4A. They moved up to 5A, and that was another growing district. Enrollment went up, right? They moved up to 5A and only made the playoffs twice in the last 6 years. So I think to your point, it is a valid point that moving up is very difficult to do.
Yeah.
Not a lot of teams have found success moving up. The teams a lot more have found success moving down.
Pine Richland being the prime example.
I was going to say Pine Richland. Bell Vernon won back-to-back state championships when they moved down for 2 years. And that was once again an enrollment thing, right? It wasn't an opt-up, opt-down. But
right.
Yeah. And so I think
they went up and didn't have any success, and now they're back down. So
Yep. That's really the 2 examples are Aliquippa and Avonworth that I can point to of teams that had success.
I don't know of any in the eastern side. And I mean, I'm trying to think of off the top of my head any team eastern wise. I mean, why missing? They went up and disappeared basically for I mean, not that they weren't good, but I mean they weren't the same kind of state title contender that you would expect from them or what have you. In fact, last year I don't think that they won the district championship. So, but they're back in 3A this year.
Okay. Yeah, I think they've gotten knocked out in the district tournament the last couple of years after having pretty good regular seasons.
Yeah.
And shout out to their offensive line coach, Coach O'Neill, friend of the show. He tunes in and talks to us quite a bit.
Hi, Steve.
All right. So just to wrap up here, our 5A discussion. I mentioned I mentioned Bethel Park. They've got some really good players as well. Will Savados is a Maryland committed linebacker, does a little bit of everything on offense for them. And then West Allegheny, don't sleep on Bob Palco. Once again, that's one where they bring back, their star running back, Brody Cornell, along with a couple other players. And maybe it takes Coach Palco a few years to figure it out. But I mean, he's won a 6A state championship and beat St. Joe's Prep with a public school team in Mount Lebanon. So Coach Palco's won 9 WPIAL titles, multiple state titles in his career. So, I don't worry so much. West Allegheny might take them a couple years to get there, but they're one that I'm like they could move up and do it because Coach Palco can do it, right?
Yeah, clearly.
Um, yeah, and then finally in the Big East teams, Woodland Hills has won the conference the last 2 years, but they lost quite a bit to graduation. And Penn Trafford returns a lot. Ben Grabowski, their leading rusher, and then Cody Yakimelli, who's the younger brother of Cade Yakimelli, who you may remember having led Peterstown, or not Peterstown, I'm sorry, Penn Trafford. I had PT in my notes, and you would think I would know what I was talking about. But Cade Yakimelli led Penn Trafford to that 2021 state title. So his younger brother Cody ran for over 800 yards and 12 touchdowns last year. Their leading receiver Nick Ponca is also back. So I think Penn Trafford's the best team in the Big East, and I think really the interesting story there is who's going to be the third guaranteed playoff team, because all these conferences, 3 teams are guaranteed to get in the playoffs, and then there's a couple wild card spots to go around. So I do think that Penn Trafford and Woodland Hills are the best 2 in that Big East conference. But then who's going to get that third spot? Does Gateway finally get back in? They finished in 3-way ties and lost out on tiebreakers the last couple years. Franklin Regional was just 1-9 last year, but they played a bunch of really close games. And those are the teams that you look for that you're like, okay, you may have lost a bunch of games last year, but you lost a bunch of games by like pretty close margins
Hmm.
that, okay, you might be a team that can take a step forward this year. So I think Franklin Regional, they've got a pretty strong tradition in history. They might get back in things. And then Connellsville coming back into the WPIAL after playing 2 years as an independent, which actually is a really good segue into 4A, but I want to let you talk about 5A statewide before I get to 4A.
Yeah, 5A statewide. As I was just alluding to, I think that there's any number of teams that that are championship worthy, or district champion worthy. That somebody's just going to have to rise up. I mean, some of the ones obviously for the WPIAL teams there coming out of District 3, maybe Exeter again, as far as that goes with, and that's the thing with the 800-pound gorilla Bishop McDevitt moving up to 6A. Okay, it's really left, a huge void in 5A across the eastern part of the state. And
That was going to
uh,
be my question for you was who is there? Because Roman moved up and McDevitt moved up, and I guess
yeah, well,
Imhotep came back
Imhotep's
down.
filling that void. I mean, as far as the overall favorite, but I think for what WPIAL teams need to look at is obviously state semifinal. It's going to come from District 3, and from District 3, boy, I tell you, it's going to be a very interesting race in 5A, because a lot of teams got reclassed. Even Twin Valley moving up from 4A to 5A. Now, that may be a team. I mean, they played in the 4A championship game
Mhm.
last year. Boy, they sure look good. And that might be a team that could buck the trend in really moving up in class and keeping the trajectory totally going up as well. So I'd say probably Exeter, Twin Valley. I'm trying to think of, somebody in 5A out of the Lancaster Lebanon League that might come out of there. But Conestoga Valley had a great season last year, but they lost a lot. So I think that we're just kind of waiting for teams to emerge, and 5A team out of the Mid Penn Conference. Mid Penn Conference is really, as far as the good teams and good programs are, kind of in 6A and then 4A and 3A, not so much in 5A there. So
Yeah. And the 5A in the WPIAL is so deep that, any one of these teams could go on a big run. And obviously, especially in the lower classifications, but even here, a couple injuries could change the whole complexion of everything, right? There's a team that, we might be talking about as a top contender that, suffers an injury or two, and then all of a sudden they seem like they take a step back and aren't quite as good as what we expected. But hopefully everyone's able to stay healthy this year, and we get to see strength on strength, because there are a ton of good teams here. And as I was looking at this, right, off the top of my head, naming 10 contenders for a 5A title, I'm like, there's only 8 spots in the quarterfinals. There's only 4 spots that, like, some of these teams are going to get knocked out and be like, oh, we're a first round knockout. But like, there's just so many good teams here that it's going to happen to somebody, right? Like,
Yeah, right,
it's
right. I
just
mean,
how it's going to go.
same thing happens in District 3. I mean,
Yeah.
that there's going to be some first round knockouts, and especially even in District 1. I mean, we haven't really talked about them too much, but
Yeah, actually,
Westchester
is this the
Ruston
year?
is always going to be tough.
Is this the year District 1 can finally topple a District 12 team in like one of the top classifications? I mean, I guess
Well,
Imhotep's coming down, but
correct. That's the tough part. I would say it could have been a 5A team had it not been for Imhotep dropping down. Okay. So, looking at even up to in District 11, trying to figure out whether, a 5A program out of there might make it. It's really hard. I mean, you have that blockage at 6A from, the Philadelphia Catholic League and the Philadelphia area. Really, their only hope was in 5A, but now here comes Imhotep, down there that is going to, like I said, just kind of block everybody from there, I think, in moving on to a state championship game. But you never know.
yeah. Yeah.
That's
All
why we
right.
play
And
the season.
that is. In 4A, there's some intriguing storylines here, but with Thomas Jefferson moving up, with Aliquippa moving down, I mean, it feels like the path is really cleared for McKeesport here, who's lost in the last 3 4A WPIAL title games to finally break through and win that first title since 2005. McKeesport has Keemon Spell, the top running back in the country. He's a Georgia commit now. And it feels like this is McKeesport's title to lose. And there's a lot of other good teams. Don't get me wrong here, but I feel like some of the high drama that we had in 4A the last couple years with Aliquippa's got forced up and is having to compete against these bigger schools, and Thomas Jefferson's this powerhouse, and McKeesport's really good with their triple option. There's good teams here, but I really think that, like, with the amount of talent that McKeesport has on their team, they're the team to beat here in 4A. And a little of the drama is kind of left with TJ moving up and Aliquippa moving down.
Yeah, I would totally agree. Let's just say the star power has kind of moved on. So look, there'll be some teams that are going to step up. And the team that I've kind of been waiting for them to step up for a couple of years now is Central Valley. Um, you know, we always talk about that during the program, about a Central Valley and what have you, and that may be the team, that could kind of rise back up into prominence. I think this year through the Parkway there.
Yeah, and they've kind of ping pongs back and forth between 3A and 4A the last couple cycles. But I think, yeah, the Parkway here is absolutely loaded. And I want to talk about all these teams. The one other thing that is noteworthy, WPIAL wide, is that the Fayette County schools that had been playing as independents, so Connellsville, we talked about in 5A, Albert Gallatin and Uniontown in 4A, and then Brownsville down in 2A, they were all playing independent schedules. They're all back now. They all decided to come back to the WPIAL, which is great. I'm very glad to see them all come back. But I think that's going to add, especially into 4A, a very interesting dynamic, because Albert Gallatin was a team that had a multi-year losing streak when they left the WPIAL. They had one of the longest playoff droughts. They had a bunch of things going against them. And Coach Dindal's done a great job down there of rebuilding that program. They went undefeated last year playing an independent schedule. They run a wishbone triple option offense. It's really fun to watch. But the question is now, okay, you went undefeated playing an independent schedule. Now you're coming back into the WPIAL, and how's that going to go, right? So I think that's definitely a storyline to keep an eye on. And the other cool thing with them all coming back is Laurel Highlands had stayed in the WPIAL and was kind of on an island in Fayette County, that like everyone around them had gone to play independent, and they were the only ones left in the WPIAL. And now they've got some in-county rivals with Uniontown and Albert Gallatin back in their conference. So not only does that help the travel schedule for all those schools, but it's also just adding those rivalry games back on the schedule that either would have had to be a week 0 game in the past or may not have happened at all. So I love seeing the rivalry games happen. Always like seeing those, close geographic communities playing against each other. But in the Big Six, I think the team to watch there is South Fayette. I talked a little bit earlier about how they had been dominant in 4A for 4 years before they moved up to 5A because of enrollment. Moving back down to 4A now, I think this sets up really well for South Fayette. And then Ringgold, they haven't made the playoffs in quite some time, but then they're only a few years removed from ending the longest losing streak in the WPIAL, which they did in 2024. But
Right.
they've got a senior quarterback in Dennis Hawkins who threw for over 1,000 yards. They've got a Youngstown State commit at wide receiver in Dimitri Lowe. So Ringgold's a team now with this conference, I think, really has a shot to not only make the playoffs, but maybe even make some noise. And the hard thing in 4A, just like last cycle, is that only 8 teams are going to make the playoffs. So 2 teams from each conference plus 2 wild cards. So the playoff field is extremely limited in who's able to actually get into the postseason. And that's going to be something to watch as we go through, especially if there's conference games in the non-conference portion of the schedule between teams from different conferences, how they stack up against each other. I think McKeesport is certainly the best team overall in their conference. Not only do they have Keemon Spell, who's a Georgia commit, but Javian Robinson at wide receiver is a South Carolina commit. And they're putting Jordan Stuvance at quarterback. His dad played safety for the Steelers for a little while, Russell Stuvance. So plenty of athletic talent in his bloodline as well. So McKeesport's going to be really good. Behind them, I think is kind of a second tier in that conference is Kiski and Shaler, who both made the playoffs in 5A last year and now moved down to 4A. So I think that's kind of a story to watch there is how do those teams fare now moving down. And then the Parkway is just absolutely loaded with talented teams. And it was really hard to look at this and pick like which 2 teams are going to make the playoffs because all of them look capable, right? Newcastle's the defending conference champions. They had a true freshman last year, Marino Graham, who threw for over 1,700 yards and rushed for over 900 yards. Bring back their star receiver, Kai Cox, who had over 500 yards receiving and 6 touchdowns, has a bunch of D1 offers. Those 2 are really good basketball players too. But Newcastle being the defending conference champs got knocked out in the semifinals by Aliquippa last year, but Aliquippa's gone. Montour has been kind of the sexy pick that everyone's jumping on the Montour bandwagon just because they bring back Brandon Bennett, their quarterback, as well as Archie Collins, who's another sensational sophomore, did a little bit of everything for them last year. Montour brings back a couple of really good receivers as well. So they're absolutely a team to watch. Like Montour is very capable of making a deep run here, but they also lost twice to Newcastle last year in the regular season and in the playoffs. So when I was looking at it, I was like, man, like it's hard to pick against Newcastle, even though everyone's jumping on the Montour bandwagon just because Newcastle beat them twice last year. And then we talked about Central Valley moving up. Mars has a new head coach since Coach Casper moved over to North Hills, his alma mater. But Mars returns a bunch of players as well from their team last year that was a playoff team in 4A. And then Blackhawk returns a 1,300-yard rusher and a bunch of other guys who were key contributors for them as well, that even sitting at the bottom of the conference, like they've got a ton of returning talent too. So that Parkway conference is absolutely stacked. I think top to bottom, when you talk about best conferences in the WPIAL, it's the Allegheny 6 and 5A and the Parkway in 4A, that there's just no bad teams, right? Like somebody's going to wind up finishing in last place in these leagues, but there's really no bad teams in these conferences.
Yeah, and that's the thing about 4A as well is, well, I think just in overall we talked about how the movement of these teams throughout these classifications have really left voids as far as like who the favorites are going to be, because you had the big teams either move up or down. And I think pickers are scrambling a little bit. I think that's what makes a lot of these classifications really wide open. I mean, 4A, I think, is, across the state, I think is, wide open. Um, you're probably talking about, Pope John Paul II out of District, 1 that, could emerge, out of the East, or LS, or maybe even Bethlehem Catholic. LS was not far removed from a 4A championship game a couple of years ago. And so, I think it could be any one of a number of teams now. And I think that's what'll be great about 5A and 4A this year is the parity that we're looking at across the state.
Yeah, absolutely. And 4A has kind of always been the one of these top three classifications where there was a little bit more parity, right? We had a District 11 team win the title last year. So you've got other districts, right? We've had big runs from Jersey Shore out of District 4. Even looking back to the times when Cathedral Prep District 10 made some
and
runs.
They dropped out, aren't they 4A team this year?
I think they are back in 4A.
Yeah.
Yes, I believe they are. So, right. So this is the one where you start to get some real statewide competition, that it's not just, the WPIAL champ, the District 3 champ, and the District 12 champion, right?
Yeah,
There's
correct.
a little more
Exactly.
distribution in
Clearly.
4A. Yes. All right. So we talked at the outset of the show about our new sponsor for this year, Get Recruited. So Bruce, you talked a bit about Andrew Cohen and the work he does there. Obviously, we have his phone number, which is rare that you see these people like put their phone numbers out there that people can just call them, text them, whatever. And I saw on their website right now, they're offering a free film review for anyone who just wants to get their film reviewed. And the other cool thing that I'll note, and I'll let you talk some more too, about them is, the success stories that they list on their website are not all like, oh, we got this kid to, an SEC school. We sent someone to Georgia or Alabama or whatever. It's the success stories are, we got kids to D2, D3 schools, right? Like with the cost of college these days, and I know like D2, D3 may not give full scholarships, but any scholarship money you can get to go to college and further your career is a fantastic thing. So I think, the fact that they've got connections, not only trying to force, not only trying to work the D1 angle, but also across every level of college to try and find the right fit for a kid is really important.
Absolutely. And, quite honestly, I mean, it was great. And truth be told, Andrew and I were in the car today, and I'm listening him talk to one of his clients, and, going step by step of, the things that, that the player was charged at getting done related to his conditioning and what have you. But, talking with him as well, I mean, he's got support as well on the school side too, because grades are an important part of this process. And regardless of what may people think, you open up so many more opportunities if you've have an ability to bring the schools of higher learning into it, like the NESCAC, like the Ivy League, like the Patriot League, into play. You bring in so many opportunities. So, there's a lot of things that Coach Cohen is involved in, but the biggest thing is his personal approach. Okay, that talking to each and every client, and the client having that phone number, that if a parent just wants to find out what is going on, I haven't heard from Coach Cohen in a week, hey, just give him a call. And believe me, Andrew and I see each other a good bit, and I'll tell you what, his phone, it's kind of like he is the Adam Schefter of college football recruiting, because he's on the phone the whole time. But he only has one phone. I think Adam Schefter has about 3 phones, but Coach Cohen's got it to his ear. But the main thing is that it's a personal approach, not only with his clients, but with the college coaches. The college coaches know that when they get an email from Andrew Cohen, they're going to open it up because they know that it's the straight scoop about players. And that's the best thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So we're excited to have Get Recruited Consulting on board with the WPIAL Blitz show this year, and you can check them out on Twitter, email, phone, website,
Oh,
however you want to get a hold of them.
yeah, you'll see all of, the clients that he's got from across the state of Pennsylvania, from across the country. I mean, he's not just limited to Pennsylvania. Andrew's got guys at IMG. I mean, that he represents, and across the state of Pennsylvania. Looking at some guys at across the state there. So we'll try and retweet those guys too. From
Mm-hmm.
Pennsylvania, but just take a look. I get that question all the time. Well, who is Coach Cohen working with? I don't know. I'll just check his Twitter feed. You'll see all of his clients from all over the country because he's in constant mode of getting publicity out there for everybody. Not only that, but Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, everything.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So moving on to 3A, where we have one of our two defending state champions in the WPIAL with Avonworth.
Mhm.
And it is worth noting here that the team that was Amani Christian last year, they were part of a cooperative agreement with Propel Braddock Hills. And this year, Propel is the sponsoring school for the co-op. So Amani is still participating, but they're not the sponsoring school. So most of the same players are still playing for the team. It's just called Propel now instead of Amani. But it's the same coaching staff, just a different school, different colors that are sponsoring the co-op. But for all intents and purposes, it is pretty much the same team that went to the WPIAL title game and lost to Avonworth. I think the noteworthy thing here is how realignments has shuffled things around in 3A, that
Yeah.
you now have 4 conferences. 16 teams are going to make the playoffs. So you're going to have no buys. Everyone's got to get through 4 rounds of the playoffs just to get to the state semifinals in the bracket. So there's no rest for the weary in 3A. And, with realignment, you've got Propel and Avonworth, who played in the championship game last year, now in the same Three Rivers Conference, along with West Mifflin, who's got Armand Hill at running back, who's one of the top running backs in the whole WPIAL. So that's a really intriguing conference, along with South Park, who's a couple years removed from a WPIAL title in 2A, moving up. Then North Catholic moves over to the Allegheny 7 conference. Actually, that's a great geographic conference there for people who like geography. All those schools are within 20 miles of each other. I think the longest
Wow.
trip anyone has to take is 20 miles. So
Well,
I guess
that's good for the schools because they'll get a lot of visiting fans to the games. I mean, that should help attendance.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess you could say if you put a pin in a map in the middle of the conference and drew a circle, it would be a 10-mile radius, right? Because
Wow.
around that midpoint. But like North Catholic to Burrell or Valley, I think is the farthest one, and that's like 19.7 miles or something like
Wow.
that. So
Wow.
it's really close neighboring districts that'll all battle it out. But also that's like you said, good for attendance, but also good for some of those historic rivalries there too. The big story is Aliquippa now moving down to 3A, joining a Western Hills Conference with a Hopewell team that has one of the top quarterbacks in the entire WPIAL in James Boo Boo Armstrong, and Beaver, who now has Javin Peel at quarterback. If you remember, Javin Peel a couple years ago set the WPIAL freshman record at Western Beaver for the most passing yards by a freshman in WPIAL history. Last year, he played at Kiski Prep because he wanted to transfer elsewhere. The WPIAL turned him down on his transfer, so he wound up going to Kiski Prep for last year, but he came back and into the WPIAL now and is at Beaver this year. So that's going to be another loaded conference there in the Western Hills between Aliquippa, Hopewell, and Beaver. And it's going to be a tough road to hoe for any of these teams. I think the top contenders, you can't pick against Aliquippa. Akiva Woods comes back at running back. He's a star recruit at defensive back. North Catholic lost a little bit, but has quite a bit coming back as well from a team that went to the semifinals last year. And Propel is still loaded with talented athletes. Avonworth, defending state champs, they're the champs until someone knocks them off, right? And they beat Aliquippa in the regular season in a non-conference game last year. And then kind of flying under the radar a little bit is Bell Vernon, after they missed the playoffs last year in 4A, but they moved back down to 3A where they won 2 state championships. So you've got a lot of, highly accomplished programs over the last couple years, all colliding here in 3A. And for as excited as I am about 5A, I am equally as excited about 3A because the depth of talent here is just tremendous.
Well, you know, I think that when you say that, the depth of talent, I think that it's been more condensed, at least on the eastern side, and what have you. Wyomissing's moved back down to 3A, and they would be the kind of the favorite, in District 3 from a 3A perspective. Um, Really trying to get my hands around, in District 11, who might be a contender, for them out there besides maybe Northwest Lehigh or that. But beyond that, I think Trinity, though, another team here out of District 3 that could give a little trouble, to a WPIAL team. They made the state semifinals last year in 3A, and they've got a lot back. So watch out for Trinity as maybe like the emerging team in 3A, across the state.
That's a good one to watch. And just to talk about the depth of talent a little bit too within the WPIAL, I mentioned Avonworth not only being the two-time defending WPIAL champs, defending state champs, but Dimitri Valsaris back at running back after running for 1,500 yards and 24 touchdowns. Bryce Metz is a name to watch. He was their leading tackler last year. He'll play a little tight end, but really the key to the middle of their defense. Romello Harris Blanchard led the team in sacks last year and tackles for loss. And the kid that absolutely burst onto the scene last year was Jaden Jones at wide receiver, over 1,000 receiving yards, 11 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions on defense. Had a couple interceptions in the WPIAL championship game against Amani. And I remember telling you guys heading into the state championship game, like, watch out for this kid, right? Because he was just flying. I mean, he was a sophomore. He's 6'3", just like flying up the recruiting charts. Got a Florida State offer last year, and had a fantastic run throughout the playoffs. And Avonworth did it on both sides of the ball, right? They were good and solid on offense, but man, their defense was just locked down last year, and they returned a lot of those guys on the defensive side of the ball this year, which is why I think Avonworth is probably the favorites, but can't sleep on Aliquippa ever. Propel brings back dual threat quarterback Gabe Jenkins, who's a Colorado committed defensive back. Some young guys on that team as well. Ty Sewell and Daniel Stevens are some pretty good running backs. They lost their top 2 receivers, but bring some other talent back. And watch out for DeJuan Craighead at defensive end. And then Maurice Williams in the middle of not Amani's defense. Sorry, Propel's defense. That's going to take me a little while to get used to that Propel Amani changeover.
The team formerly known as Amani Christian.
Right. Armand Hill, I mentioned at West Mifflin's a West Virginia commit. And, Akiva Woods at Aliquippa's got some offers at defensive back. James Armstrong at Hopewell is only a sophomore at quarterback. And then their running back, Nasir Wade's also a sophomore, or I think maybe he's a junior. I don't remember, but Nasir Wade, another name to watch there. Because he's been really, really good the last couple of years. Sorry, he is a junior, and so is James Armstrong. I miscopied some notes there. So, but yeah, watch out for those 2 guys as well. They're both super talented. And then Olsh, Elwood City moving up. Just a really, really deep, talented 3A classification in the WPIAL. The other name to watch is Tevin Owen Kratzenberg from Highlands. This kid has a chance to be the WPIAL's leading rusher this year. Highlands runs the ball a lot. They're going to play a couple weaker defenses throughout their schedule, and the kid's just absolutely electric. So that's one. We'll probably see his name a few times on the Players of the Week list.
Wow.
Yep. All right, on to 2A now, where kind of like what happened in 4A, right? Where in 4A, you had some teams move up, some teams move down, and lost a little luster, right? Same thing kind of happened here in 2A, that you had some teams move up to 3A and some teams move down to 1A, where defending champs Seton LaSalle are still the team to beat in 2A. But Steel Valley graduated almost their whole team. South Allegheny's back, Western Beaver's back. Western Beaver was a semifinalist last year, but Washington, who was a semifinalist last year, moved down to 1A. But Bishop Canevin, I think, is the team to watch here. They're moving up from 1A to 2A, but they bring back a lot of talented players. And I think the Bishop Canevin Seton LaSalle game is probably the game of the year in 2A as far as the regular season schedule goes. And those two teams not only landed in the same conference, but also have a chance to very possibly be the two teams that make it all the way to the championship game.
Yeah, and slugging it out again, with kind of a full slate of games. But no, you're exactly right. I mean, I think there's across the state. I mean, it isn't anything that isolated with the WPIAL. I think across the state, the movement of teams in this last or in this next 2-year cycle, it's everybody's taking pretty much of a wait and see attitude on who's going to emerge. I mean, because it's been very untraditional and or ones that teams that you're not accustomed, the not usual, the not the usual suspects, so to speak, in each one of these classifications. So I think that's what is going to make this a regular season something special.
Yeah, I agree. And to just throw some names out there, Seton LaSalle's junior quarterback, Kia Jones, is back. He got inserted as a starter about halfway through last year, but he's a top recruit at defensive back. Their leading rusher, Kamar Freeman, has run for 1,300 yards and 21 touchdowns last year. And they've got a really strong returning core there for the Rebels. Bishop Canevin, senior quarterback Brady Wagner, senior running back Meonte Mott, as well as Minicon Johnson at outside linebacker, who's a D1 recruit. I think he's going to UConn. They've got another UConn commit on the defensive line. Then they have a Rutgers commit on their offensive line. So like Bishop Canevin having 3 D1 commits in the trenches for a 2A team is definitely something to keep an eye on. Yeah, I know, right? And then the Midwestern Conference, just top to bottom, like as I was going through, I was like, everybody brought guys back. Like Western Beaver had 2,000-yard rushers last year. Senior running back Wyatt Sparbani is back after 1,200 yards and 25 touchdowns. Amari Marshall, who started at quarterback as a freshman last year, also ran for over 1,000 yards. He's back. Beaver Falls kind of snuck back onto the scene last year. Their junior quarterback, Xavier Clark, is back. Mohawks got the Stratton brothers back in the backfield. One of them was injured last year, but they're both back and healthy. Riverside's got a returning quarterback in Aiden Gatos. Now, and then Neshannock moving up from 1A to 2A. Is definitely noteworthy after the success they've had. The other under the radar thing I want to mention in 2A is that we've got a couple programs in McGuffey and Quaker Valley that really had some struggles in 3A, now moving down to 2A. Same with East Allegheny, had a couple, had a not so great season last year, moving down to 2A. I think those are ones that you sort of keep an eye on and say, okay, you may have struggled a little bit in 3A, but now you're moving down a little bit. Maybe you have to face a couple teams with some better, some easier defenses and things like that. Let's see what kind of noise you can make. And then Brownsville moving back into the WPIAL after playing a few years as an independent. So some teams to keep an eye on.
See that.
Yeah,
nice to see these independent teams coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. Might be a little bit of a struggle for Brownsville. They've haven't won a game in over 2 years. They've lost like 18 games in a row. But nice to see them coming back. And I'll say this, for Brownsville, right? credit to the kids that go out there and play just for the love of the game, right? Like even if Brownsville went 0-8 the last 2 years, but the kids are still going out there and playing, right? Like,
Yep.
and those kids are learning more life lessons about tenacity and what to do in the face of adversity and things like that than players that want to hang their head and give up when times get hard, right? Like the ability to battle through tough times is really going to shape and benefit
That
those
is the
kids for the
life
long run.
lesson of
Right.
football. I mean, and seen a
Right.
couple of those examples out here in the Berks League for years with Kutztown. I mean, they really took it on the chin for a couple of years. And you admire those teams, and you admire the teams that play them, okay, because they respect those teams enough to still give it 100. Unfortunately, to give it 100%, you know. But it's not a beauty contest, okay. I mean, it's a football game, and
Mm-hmm.
you just give a lot of credit to teams that go through that. And before we get too far along here, I'm having trouble getting into the live chat, but a shout out to our buddy Vince Coca 2020 and Bruce Emsweiler. Those guys are getting involved in the chat, which I mean, get to some more people in the chat or whatever. But that's a lot of the reason why we do this show live, is so that we give the fans an opportunity to comment on what we're saying. We don't shut out. We're not a podcast that shuts out the fans. We are inclusive in that regard, aren't we, Ian?
Oh, absolutely. We love when fans give us some comments, and if you have questions for us that you want us to answer during the show, just throw them in the chat. Happy to answer them. Or even throughout the year, feel free to shoot us questions
Sure, during the
on
week.
Twitter or anywhere else. We'll answer them on the show. Happy to have fan involvement in the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Really appreciate that.
Yep. All right. So we talked about 2A, and moving on to 1A now. 1A, where Clairton is the defending WPIAL and state champions. They are loaded once again. But let's not forget, Clairton got a bit of a scare from Jeanette in the WPIAL playoffs last
Yeah.
year. And Fort Cherry had Matt C. graduate, but his younger brother Colin is going to be a freshman this year. And Fort Cherry returns a lot of talent. And the team to watch is Washington. Washington was a
Yes.
2A semifinalist last year. They gave Seton LaSalle everything Seton could handle. Like literally the semifinal game that Seton won, Washington was in the game to the end, and Washington turned the ball over in the red zone 4 times in the second half. And it's like if any one of those possessions turned into touchdowns, like that, what was a 9-point victory, certainly looks a lot closer in the end. But the scoreline wasn't indicative of how close that game actually was, because Washington gave Seton everything they could handle, and they bring back a lot of talented guys too. So I'll run through some names here, but I think really those four, to me, when looking at what teams brought talented players back, are really the top contenders for the WPIAL title. And there are some other good teams out there, right? In the Big Seven, Laurel's the defending champions, had a lot of guys graduate from the team that went to the WPIAL title game and lost by just 2 points to Clairton last year. They obviously had that great defensive effort and upset Fort Cherry in the semifinals, but Laurel's lost a little bit, so I expect them to take a little step back. Southside Beaver, with their triple option running game, always tough to defend. They bring back Amari Moman, who ran for almost 700 yards and 7 touchdowns, was their second leading rusher last year. So I think they're a top contender. Union, who had that amazing run to the WPIAL title and then making it to the state championship game back in 2022. They had moved up to 2A last cycle. They're coming back down to 1A, so they're definitely a team to keep an eye on because they've got some guys coming back. Cornell moving over from what was a pretty brutally tough Black Hills Conference last year, now playing in the Big Seven Conference, is a team to watch as well. And then I talked about Washington, just throw out some names for folks to remember. Jamari Walker ran for 471 yards and 9 touchdowns last year. Junior Amir Nelson did a little bit of everything with almost 350 rushing yards, over 500 receiving yards, 8 touchdowns. And then Trenton Grooms with 300 yards and 4 touchdowns also returns to the backfield. So Washington got a lot of talented playmakers on that team. Definitely going to be a top challenger to Fort Cherry, who, in addition to Matt Sieg's younger brother Colin, have Eli Salvini and Ryan Huey both back in the backfield. Salvini ran for over 900 yards and 19 touchdowns, and Huey ran for 620 yards and 12 touchdowns last year. So a lot of talent returning for both of those teams in the Black Hills Conference. So I think those are definitely some of the top contenders there, not only for the conference title, but the WPIAL title. Clairton's got junior Brandon Murphy, who is one of the top defensive all-around recruits in the state, did a little bit of everything for Clairton last year. They're going to have to find a replacement at quarterback, but they've got a ton of talent on that team. Should be not only the top contender in the Eastern Conference, but also, threat to defend their title as well. Jeanette's got star receiver Jace Powell coming back to their team. Greensburg Central Catholic and Leechburg each have a few guys coming back. And the under the radar team to watch for me is Sarah Catholic. Sarah had some struggles last year, but friend of the show, Coach Akeem Robinson, now in his second year as head coach there. Sarah Catholic moving over from the Black Hills Conference now to the Eastern Conference. Will probably get a little bit easier of a schedule. Could be a team to watch to sneak into one of those last couple playoff spots. And we saw what Coach Keem did at Sarah a few years ago in 2A when he was the defensive coordinator, leading them to all the way to the championship game and all the turnovers they produced. California is probably the top team in the Tri-County South once again. But watch out for Fraser, who actually knocked off California in the first round of the playoffs last year, moving over to the Tri-County South. Fraser brings back their star quarterback, Brady Seacrest, who threw for 1,200 yards, 16 touchdowns last year. But California's ground game is always just so tough to stop. They've got spread the workload around and it will just, pound the crap out of you. So a lot of talent there in 1A, but I think the top contenders are Clairton, Jeanette, Washington, and Fort Cherry.
Yeah, and you kind of sold my thunder there about Sarah Catholic. I mean, another friend of the show, but
Yep.
a team coming back, but they had some glory there for a couple years, and fondness in my heart for Sarah Catholic, and we'll see how they do. I mean, this upcoming season.
Yep, absolutely. And then on a statewide level, Bishop Guilfoyle is always a top contender out of Altoona. But other than them, I don't really know of a whole lot else, happening.
We'll see who comes out of District 2. So many teams are going to emerge there, throughout the year. So, I mean, and obviously 2A, you had obviously Southern Columbia seems to be back. Schuylkill Haven had a wonderful year last year. Can just basically, it's almost like they're playing basketball. They score so many points, but on offense. So no, it's going to be really interesting to see who kind of emerges out of District 4 and District 2, for some of the 1A and 2A teams.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a quick run through here. Biggest change that has happened in football is that we no longer have week 0. It is now week 1. The WPIAL schedule is now week 1 through week 10, not week 0 through week 9. Functionally, it's the same thing. They're just properly labeling the weeks of the year now. So what was week 0 is now called week 1, but it's still the same thing where it's an optional game. Schools get to schedule their own opponents, all that stuff, just calling it week 1 now instead of week 0. So then as we move into the season, the bulk of the schedule that's all scheduled by the WPIAL starts in week 2. which used to be called week 1, but it is the second week of the season. So calling it week 2 makes sense. So non-conference play
It
for
sounds
2
like a
weeks.
Monty Python sketch.
It really does. But no, it makes sense, right? Because we talked about this on the show last year where we'd be like, well, it's the third week of the season, but it's week 2 of the schedule. So because week 0 just is a weird nomenclature. So
Yeah.
it does make sense. But we'll get into conference play starting in week 4, and then by week 6 we'll get into conference play for all the teams as we head towards the playoffs and all that. And as I mentioned at the outset of the show, my family is expanding this fall again. So we're due to have a baby in early October. So somewhere in the middle of the season here, we may take a week or so off while I have a newborn. But we will do our best to keep everyone informed and stay tuned to our social media channels for all that. So some cool things happening this weekend. The KDKA Kickoff Classic. Bishop Canevin taking on University Prep out of the Pittsburgh City League in the first game on Friday, and then Central Catholic taking on Bergen Catholic out of New Jersey in the nightcap, and then 3 great games on Saturday. Westinghouse out of the Pittsburgh City League taking on Hickory, who's always been a strong team out of District 10. Clareton taking on Farrell, which is just a fantastic game. You got to love the fact that Clareton goes out and schedules these tough games too, right? Like they
Yeah,
played Amani Christian last year. They're playing Farrell this year, who Farrell went to the state championship game in 2A
yeah,
last year.
Farrell, I tell you, and they put on a great show. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, they did. And then the closers, Woodland Hills against Newcastle, should be another great KDK kickoff classic. Thanks to our friends over there that do a great job broadcasting games on Friday nights throughout the year. So some top games this week, obviously those ones in the kickoff classic. Also, Avonworth playing Hopewell, a game between 2 of the top 3A programs. North Catholic against Seton LaSalle is one to also keep an eye on. That's a 3A versus 2A matchup, but 2 programs that have played each other the last couple of years. And so personal note there, like obviously I'm a North Catholic alum, but my oldest son's at Seton LaSalle, so I maybe have some split loyalties in that game. Canon-Mac against Peters Township. I think this is a very interesting measuring stick game, right? We talked about Canon-Mac being probably the 3rd best team in 6A, and Peters Township's the neighboring district that's won back-to-back, or 2 out of the last 3 5A WPIAL titles now. And Peters has had the better of Canon-Mac the last few years, but now, can Canon-Mac reassert themselves in this rivalry game down in Washington County? Some other good games, Elizabeth Forward against South Allegheny, the Riv L rivalry game, because Elwood City moved up to 3A this year. It's not a conference game anymore, so Elwood City taking on Riverside. Laurel against Neshannock, another good game between Lawrence County rivals. And then Moon against Montour. Moon, a very strong 5A team, and Montour, a very strong 4A team. So another very interesting one to watch over there. All right. And then our friends of the show, the KDKA Kickoff Classic, obviously will be done by our friends at KDKA Radio. And then WMBS out of Uniontown, with all those Fayette County schools coming back. They have 2 games now. They've got Mount Pleasant taking on Laurel Highlands, and then Uniontown against Brownsville.
wow. Somebody's got to win.
In the Route 40 rivalry game. So Route 40 was the national road, right? It was the first road that federal dollars
I drove that one time. It's really fascinating.
It is.
If you've if you're ever, they talk about Route 6 being on the top of the state. They don't talk about Route 40. Like it's Route 40, right? That
40 goes from like Maryland up through Fayette County, but I think 30 is the one you're thinking of, because 30 was the Lincoln Highway, and 30 is a great road too. We drove that a couple years ago when we went from Pittsburgh out to Gettysburg, and that's just a fun drive if you don't have to get there quickly, right? Like if you have to get there quickly, you take the turnpike, but the turnpike is super boring to drive. If you want to have an interesting, fun drive, it's going to take longer, but just a nice, relaxing drive through the southern part of the state. Route 30 is awesome.
Yeah, Route 30 is awesome. And you made that point about not it's slow to drive. On September 11th, that's actually, rather than to take the turn, I was out in like out that Wes, I was in Somerset the day of like 9/11,
Wow.
and I was worried about driving the turnpike, so I drove Route 30 coming back, and it took me all day to get back. But
Hmm.
that was a kind of a wild day to say that you drove on Route 30 all the way across 9/11, but that's what I did.
Yeah. Yeah,
It
that is a wild
was a
story. So at
wild
any
day.
rate, Uniontown and Brownsville, the National Road rivalry game, because Route 40 goes through both of those towns. So that's I think they're getting a trophy made and everything. So that's
Yeah,
pretty
Route
cool. Both
40
of
is pretty
those.
cool. Route 40 is pretty cool though.
Yeah, yeah. All right. And then one other thing that's worth mentioning, actually, two other things. Our friend Carlo, the WPIAL insider, is bringing back the Thursday night primetime game. So he's worked really hard this offseason with the folks from Sportsnet Pittsburgh. And this used to be a thing a while ago that every Thursday night there would be kind of a showcase WPIAL game. And it would be broadcast on TV. And it was the only standalone game that was happening on Thursday nights. And some coaches loved it because then they had their Friday night free to head into the weekend. And some coaches hated it because they had to get up for work on Friday morning. But we're bringing it back this year. So shout out to Carlo and the whole WPIAL Insider crew, the Sportsnet Pittsburgh folks, for bringing back the Thursday night WPIAL showcase. We've got the schedule here, so we'll definitely give them shout outs throughout the year, but that's a really cool thing. And then the other one is that the Pittsburgh Riverhounds soccer team is hosting the 412 Football Classic in the middle of October. So there'll be 3 nights of games starting Thursday and then Friday and Saturday at the Riverhounds Stadium down there on the south side of Pittsburgh. The views there are fantastic because the stadium kind of looks out over the river and downtown. And I know that the Riverhounds have some big expansion plans to add a bunch of seats down there to the facility. So not saying it's going to happen anytime soon, but keep an eye out in the future. That if they get to around 20,000 seats or so, that could potentially be a site for future WPIAL championship games.
Wow, nice.
Um, that's just me talking, and I say that because right now, like the biggest high school stadium we have, I think, is Pine Richland that seats about 10,000, and North Allegheny is close to that. And then, but from there, we don't have another stadium in Western Pennsylvania between like 10,000 seats and 70,000 seats at Acrisure Stadium where the
Sure.
Steelers play. So there's not like that middle size stadium because even though like Pitt plays at Acrisure, and then the other local universities like Robert Morris, I think their stadium's only like 6,500 or something like that. There's not a mid like 20,000 seat stadium to host high school football games, which would be like perfect for a WPIAL championship game. So if the Riverhounds do their stadium expansion, that would be a pretty cool thing to have happen too. But we'll see where that all goes. That's in the future. But for this year, they're hosting football games there, which is really really cool.
Wow, that's great. And actually, just a kind of a shameless plug to
Yeah.
our broadcast on Penn Live. We have we don't have a Thursday broadcast the first week, but second week of the season, Thursday nights, executive education against Berks Catholic. Week 3 is Altoona and CD East play on a Thursday. And then the following Thursday, I think we have Perk Valley and Downingtown West. So, I mean, we have our share of good Thursday night games out here regularly. And Penn Live's kind of brought them together between all the districts here to form a really nice schedule of games. We'll have some District 11 games, including Bethlehem Catholic and Easton and Nazareth. So we'll have a good collection of games there.
Yeah, that's great. So thanks everyone for tuning in and joining us tonight. If you've enjoyed listening to me talk about high school football and want to hear me say some four-letter words about how the Steelers are playing, you can tune into the Steel City Blitz podcast, which we do normally on Thursday nights, but this week, because the Steelers play on Thursday, we're going to be on Wednesday night. So you can tune into that on the Steel City Blitz YouTube channel. And Bruce, you're bringing back the Fresh Set of Down show this year.
Yeah. Dave and I are off hiatus. We'll start this upcoming Sunday, August 30th, and a fresh set of downs back on a Sunday night. We had a difficult time trying to find a day that worked. Last year we were a bit in transition there. So Sunday night worked. So yeah, I mean, we'll be, I guess, the first ones talking about, the following week's games, on Sunday night. But fresh set of downs with myself, Dave, Micah. I'm sure we'll get a lot of contributions from a lot of the great guys that cover sports in the Eastern side there too. And obviously, as we head down to the end of the year, we always kind of merge together to form the Fresh Set of Downs WPIAL podcast, state championship extravaganza. So a lot of fondness for the combined efforts.
Yes. Yeah. Always a good time and always something to look forward to. State championship weekend as well. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks to Get Recruited Consulting for sponsoring the show this year. And you can check us out at WPIAL Blitz or at Badgley Bruce on Twitter, or check out my WPIAL articles on steelcityblitz.com. Like I said, conference previews are almost all up, and they'll all be up by the end of the week by the time we kick off on Friday. And we'll also have some other interesting tidbits as the season rolls along. We'll have games of the week articles and all that. So thanks everyone for tuning in to our 2-hour season preview show. Did not expect to go this long, but it's great to be talking high school football again. It's great to be back, and looking forward to a great year.
Yeah, and see you guys next week on Monday night after the kids are put together or put to bed. So.
Put to bed.
All right, man. Take care. See ya.
Thanks.
Bye now.